The best way to kill the European Green Deal is just not to do anything.
Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Wojtek Kalinowski. I'm the co-director of the Veblen Institute for Economic Reforms, which is an independent think tank based in Paris and focused on economic policies for sustainability. And it's my pleasure today to host and to moderate this webinar about the future of the European Green Deal in light of the recent elections. And more broadly, I hope we'll talk about the future of climate and sustainability policies in Europe. Of course, as you know, here in France, where I speak from, we have a very specific situation, political situation with anticipated elections, but this is a European webinar, and we gathered a group of eminent experts from all across Europe. So we want to have a pan-European policy discussion, which I hope will be both an evaluation of where we stand today and an assessment of the elections, and also some kind of outlook into the future, what could possibly achieved in the next European mandate. That's what I hope for with this webinar. And to discuss all this, we have 6 guests. Straight away, I'll just introduce you very shortly. So please feel free to add further details about yourselves or about your organization, yourselves when you talk. So in alphabetical order, we have with us Marion Guenard from Germany. Marion is Senior Policy Advisor on EU climate policy and also on franco-german cooperation at Germanwatch, a quite famous German NGO. Philippe Lamberts, as of this weekend, you might say a former MP, member of European Parliament.
Not yet. The mandate finishes on the 16th of July.
Okay, so still in charge
for another month.
Yes. So still speaking in quality of members of European Parliament, and contrary to what is indicated on the slide, you're a member of Greens, of Belgian Greens, and a high profile in the European debate about the policies for the green transition. And we are very happy to have you, to start with you in a moment to give you your political assessment of where we stand today. And then Elinor Odeberg, chief economist at a Swedish think tank, Arena Idé, progressive, and I think you will present it yourself better, Elinor, but I think we can say social democratic think tank in Sweden. Davide Panzeri, head of the European program at the Italian think tank ECO, very much climate policy focused think tank, I believe. And then I hope Laurence Tubiana will join us. Laurence is the CEO of European Climate Foundation and professor at Sciences Po here in Paris. And Pawel Wiejski, who is EU climate policy analyst at Instytut Zielonej Gospodarki. I believe it should be translated Institute for Green Economy, from Poland. So as you see, we have various countries. Not all of them. We are too many countries to give time for everyone, but we have some diversity, and I hope this will give a interesting discussion. So this is for the short presentation. As I said, I suggest we start with Philippe Lamberts for a maybe more general cross-European comment of how you see the new parliament. Keep in mind that what we want really to discuss here today is whether the heritage of the European Green Deal will survive this new majority, whether it can these policies can be kept, developed further, or whether there is a backlash ahead of us. And this, I think it's a good idea to start with maybe an overall view of how you see the new majority, the new composition of the parliament. And of course, this will be complemented by every one of us, because it's, of course, the future of the European Green Deal is not only in the European Parliament, it's also an intergovernmental affair. So I would like every one of you to comment also on how these issues are discussed in each of our countries. So Philippe, please start.
Okay. Thanks, Wojtek. Well, the European Green Deal was described in the communication of December 2019, but actually most of what has been decided so far, pertains to the climate aspect of the Green Deal. Pretty much all the rest, biodiversity, resources, pollution, has been left aside. So, well, you could witness what happened in the last year of the previous term, when majorities for major Green Deal legislative texts was fading away. Nature restoration law, pesticides, all the rest of it, you could see that we were stuck. I described that in a previous workshop. To make a long story short, the political forces who never liked the Green Deal did not oppose it as long as they found it politically costly to oppose it. But once it became politically profitable to oppose it, then they reverted to their traditional attitudes towards anything green. Now, if you look at the result of the European election, well, first at the campaign, there's one thing I want to say. There was only one political family that put respecting planetary boundaries front and center, and that is the one that I'm part of, and that's the Greens. I'm not saying that for all the others it doesn't matter, but I would say, I think I can credibly say that none of the other political families put the continuation, the expansion of the European Green Deal front and center. So indeed, I would say more on the left side of the political spectrum, there's more sympathy for the Green Deal, but don't underestimate the resistance against the Green Deal, even within Social Democrats, more traditional productivist Social Democrats, and even more so in significant parts of the far left. Now, if you look at the balance of power in the European Parliament, the two main, well, the winners are basically the right-wing national populists. I would say left-wing national populists did not win a lot. It's fairly stable. But right-wing national populists have won significantly. Liberals and Greens have lost significantly. That's just a fact. So the political family that makes the pursuit of the European Green Deal front and center has been weakened in the European Parliament. That is a fact. Now, we may discuss why, but it's a fact. Now, what is shaping up for the next term is already, well, could have been foreseen, and it is unfolding as we speak. The three political families that supported Ursula von der Leyen in her first term, and don't forget, Ursula von der Leyen is the person who initiated the European Green Deal. It's no one else than her. European People's Party, Social Democrats and Liberals are, as we speak, talking together to re-establish the so-called von der Leyen coalition for the next term. Now, if you look at the numbers, that coalition was a comfortable one last time, but we could also see that it was an elusive one at times, because even if numerically these three groups enjoyed a very comfortable majority, on many votes there was quite a lot of leakage in their majority, so people were not basically voting, and especially on Green Deal matters. So you might say it's going to be even worse now, since their numerical majority has shrunk a bit, because mostly of the Liberals losing and not compensating fully the wins of the European People's Party. So they might be tempted to look for support outside of those three groups. And there, as I said before the election, the choice is binary. Either they are seeking support from some of the right-wing national populist parties, typically Giorgia Meloni's Fratelli d'Italia, and then obviously their condition will be to kill the Green Deal, or they look at us the Greens, and then, of course, our condition will be the pursuit of the European Green Deal. And that is, the jury is still out. The jury is still out as to what they are going to do. If I listen to Ursula von der Leyen during her campaign, the first 4 weeks of the campaign, she was pretty much mentioning Meloni's Fratelli d'Italia. And then in the last week of the campaign, she again highlighted the need for the European Green Deal and the Greens. So my reading of the situation, also based on conversations with the major players, is that she would prefer to expand the majority to the Greens because actually she wants, and she has invested a lot of political capital into the Green Deal. But the leader of the European People's Party, Manfred Weber, is rather on the line of, let's stick the three of us together, EPP, SND, and Renew, and if we need some support, we can informally gather it from the likes of Fratelli d'Italia and maybe a few others. That is what is at stake at the moment. We are not yet 48 hours after the election, so it's too early to say exactly how this will solidify. The choice has not been made. But the general attitude towards the Green Deal is still pretty much negative, in the sense that you could hear leaders of the European People's Party, leaders of Renew Europe, typically Emmanuel Macron, calling for a pause, a moratorium, call it like you want, but basically that we had done already too much on green issues and that we should be content with implementing what has been decided. Now, let me just finish by elaborating on this. The best way to kill the European Green Deal is just not to do anything. The best way to kill the European Green Deal is just not to do anything. To reach the objectives, the nominal objectives, certainly the climate objectives mentioned in the European Green Deal. Just one example, and it's an obvious one, our agriculture is a net carbon emitter. Well, we can't reach the minus 55 target without agriculture becoming a carbon sink. Well, as we stand with the current common agricultural policy and with current regulation, our agriculture is bound to remain a net emitter. So doing nothing on the agriculture is a very good way to make sure that we are going to miss our targets. That's one example. The most relevant example of this doing nothing strategy is money. The first euro of the public funding part of the European Green Deal has not been found. There's no funding behind all the efforts that are needed to execute on the regulations that we have adopted. I mean, energy performance of buildings, energy networks. This requires massive investment, private and public, and in our view, and I can only refer you to the study of the Rousseau Institute, The Road to Net Zero, it's 2/3 public, 1/3 private. The money is still simply not there. So just do nothing, the money will not materialize, and the Green Deal is dead. So indeed, when you say moratorium, equates to saying, I want the death of the European Green Deal. It's not, let's just implement what has been there. It is, I want it to die a slow death. That is what we are facing. The only chance that I see that the Green Deal will not die is first the personal commitment. Well, first, von der Leyen being re-elected and her keeping the commitment to the Green Deal. It has to come from the top. If it's not coming from the top, it's dead. But now, it's not because it comes from the top that the problem is solved. We are not in the French Fifth Republic where the president can rule by decree, and even that is difficult in France. The president of the commission is no French president, so she needs majorities in parliament and council. And if we look at the evolution of the landscape, it's far from certain that finding the majorities to make sure that we succeed in the stated targets of the European Green Deal, especially the climate targets, it's not sure at all that we will find the majorities in Parliament and Council. So without strong public pressure, like the climate marches that we had in 2019, I don't see that happening, because what we need is that the political calculus for the political forces that are lukewarm / antagonistic to the Green Deal again becomes, yeah, but that's a political risk to be too openly against it. But at the moment, it is still politically profitable to be against any green initiative, a bit in the style of Nicolas Sarkozy back in I can't remember, where he said basically l'environnement, ça commence à bien faire. We are still in a collective political mindset that basically says we've had enough with green.
You mentioned two key points, indeed, like agriculture and finance, and of course we just the last session for the French audience who follow us for the cycle. We've been discussing thoroughly the reasons for why, for instance, the Farm to Fork program failed.
Yeah,
and all those political reasons are still there. I hope we will come to, in the second point of our discussion, more to what kind of political offer could be made to overcome such blockages. But maybe meanwhile I've seen that Laurence Tubiana has joined us. Good day, Laurence. Would you care to give your impressions of the results, or comment upon what Philippe just said?
Yes, with pleasure, and thank you for the invitation. I think Philippe has a totally cold eye and a very, very good analysis of what will be a very difficult mandate for any president of the Commission, by the way, because of this not stable majority. If you don't have a clear line, meaning if von der Leyen would have a very clear line on the Green Deal, I think she could get a majority, of course, a stable one with the Greens and even the left. But of course, given the weak support she has within EPP and the dependence now because of vis-à-vis Manfred Weber, that will be difficult. And in particular, when you see what has happening in German election in particular. So that create a very, very fragile strategy. And Philippe is very right. The problem is not so much to repeat that the Green Deal is there, is to enter that the implementation phase requires, in particular, a new set on how we get the finance, how we get the MFF aligned with the Green Deal. And so I agree with whatever he said. What we have to, how we can, in a way, balance that not good result of the election, even if, again, I would note on a better note that when you look at the country's votes, you think that even in countries where the far right was very high, you see a movement of resistance or resilience, or again, a pushback. Look at Hungary, for example, look at Finland or Sweden, Denmark even, where there was, of course, we have the sad example, like, but even in Netherlands, find a way, it didn't turn out so bad. So I think what I take of the election on the more positive side is there is a feeling in the different societies are, and it is not only the Green Deal, is the connection between the Green Deal, the human rights, the democracy that are bound together as a general platform that has to be defended with different nuances, because Tusk and Easy in EPP, I don't know what his policy in EPP. That would be interesting to explore. So what I see is that there is a movement of, say, at least a potential front against the populist, with, of course, a big question mark of how the right-wing parties within the center-right would decide if they cooperate with the right or not. As Philippe has said very clearly, we have exactly this discussion in France these days. On the other side, there is an international element that would push for the Green Deal to continue, which are, if EU doesn't decide from a sudden to be a totally closed market, which I don't think we are there, because even the right-wing people are not for, particularly in Germany, are not for being a too protectionist market. you look at what the evolution, in particular Chinese evolution, of course, for them, they have bet on the Green Deal in their own terms very, very strongly. So they will be, again, more and more competitive on solar panel, wind turbines, electric vehicle, etc., etc. And even on the grids technology, they are now really, really at the top. So there will be an industrial question for EU and any president of the Commission. Do we try to delay, or do we try to win out our place in the world trade? Because again, we still are a very open economy. So I would say that's something we could play on the green industrialization, on the Green Deal as the best solution to, in a way, maintain a semblance of capacity for EU to, one, be a global actor, and second, just to protect the job in the future. So that's my takeaway. But again, and the third level I would consider is how we talk differently on the Green Deal to the citizen. When we look at the polls have been done in France, I think 2/3 of people never heard even the word. So they have no idea what it is. So there is an element, if we think that there could be, and the poll says that the citizens are concerned about climate change, concerned about environment, and that's a sort of unifying factor in many countries. But at the same time, the government has been very cautious about not talking about the Green Deal. So I think there is an element of how we empower and we mobilize the citizen if they understand what is at stake, which could not be done in the election because nobody was talking about that. And second, they don't get the connection between their concern and the solution that the EU has been bringing. So at least at that stage is my reaction. So try to understand and to push for the international element that has an influence of EU survival. And of course, and the third one being the mobilization of citizens. But I don't know what Philippe thinks.
Yes, we will let the other participants come in first, but we'll come back to Philippe later on. But just to mention, well, all those issues you mentioned, Laurence, like competitiveness, industry, globalization, and accelerating the transition, decarbonization as a competitiveness factor, all this points to the Europe as a solution in the sense of finance. So at your level, you must have, maybe not on the level of society, but on the level of policymakers and expert community. This should be like a factor for overcoming the blockages, isn't it?
No, absolutely. The problem in the campaign, because that was national campaign, and because finally what the populist parties have been good at is to take environment and Green Deal and climate as taken hostage with their own concern about nationalism, migration, etc. So I think we lost partly for the moment in this campaign the narrative, because finally the governments were afraid of that, and that's why the pause, the delay, etc., was instrumentalized by many in a way vested interest on one side and this populist party on the other side. AfD is a good example in Germany, for example. So I think that's the message. I think the rational message should, of course, be mobilized, and I think they have to listen to that. And now, and again, that's why I'm thinking a lot of how we can mobilize, the economic sectors that are betting on the green transition to help, and some already have not been particularly heard, but have been speaking within the campaign to say we need a direction because this is the future of our economy. And then you have a group of, in the capitalism of today, you have really a green branch and a brown branch. And for the moment, when you look at the German government, for example, or the French government, they would like not to open that discussion, but I think at EU level we can. But it's a different strategy, absolutely. But I think that can work.
Okay, thanks. So I suggest we jump into some of our countries who are represented at least with us today. So in whatever order, maybe we'll Davide, is that okay to start with you with the Italian point, and then maybe Elinor to sweep from south to north, if that's okay.
Sure, I can start.
Yes.
Thanks for having me here. Very much on the general European view, I very much agree with Laurence and Philippe. I think Italy, in a way, bucks the trend with these elections, because whilst Meloni with her ECR, Fratelli d'Italia, definitely won the elections and increased her share of vote, definitely compared to last time that we had European election, but also compared to the last national election where she won the majority. And she's definitely one of the leaders alongside Tusk and Sanchez that comes out the strongest out of this election. I don't think this translated into an overall increase of the vote for the far right in Italy, as we have seen, for example, in France and Germany. In fact, there was more than anything else a transfer of votes from Lega, which is ID, into Fratelli d'Italia, which is ECR. So within the boundaries of the far right parties in Italy. In fact, as the final allocation is being confirmed for Italy, it is possible that the whole contingent in the right loses 1 or 2 seats, whilst the progressives pick up 1 or 2 seats, and they have been showing quite strongly. I'm talking in terms of the campaign, and again, I think this is interesting looking at Italy and compared to what maybe happened elsewhere in Europe. The parties that pushed the most, whilst climate was not. Italy is particularly in the respect that climate is not and has not yet been very much a big topic in the campaign, and this is a longer discussion. But in spite of the fact that the center-right parties, but in particular Lega and the Center Party Azione, in particular focused on the anti-European Green Deal messaging, those are the 2 parties that lost the most in these elections. So the anti-Green Deal messaging in Italy did not work, and Azione did not even enter the European Parliament. Lega went from 34% to 9%, and a lot of their votes were leaked to Fratelli d'Italia. So it's an interesting in the sense that the surge of the far right, such as it happened elsewhere, did not particularly happen. It's already there. Whatever happened during the last elections, but also in 2019 at the European elections, those same MEPs stayed divided along the right and left lines. So it's from the European Green Deal point of view, it wasn't a green election in Italy. And I also find interesting because Meloni is strengthened as she is, and also with the importance he has in Europe, she is one of the forces that will need to be reckoned with by von der Leyen when she forms the new commission. It's interesting to see where she stands compared to Lega, for example, on the European Green Deal. And I think Fratelli d'Italia has a very much of a transactional approach to the European Green Deal. They are not opposed to it wholesale, as, for example, Lega is. But they do see the value of certain parts. And for example, on renewables, Italy is pushing in a way that is consistent or nearly consistent with what we think are the needs in order to reach the Fit for 55 objectives. Their opposition is on specific topics, for example, the internal combustion engine and the energy efficiency. So, and I think on these topics, we will see a pushback also in Europe. So coming back from the European picture and what it means for Italy, I think that there is, as has been pointed out, there is very much of a EPP looking left and right, forming a majority possibly with Renew and S&D, but also on certain issues with the Greens and on certain others with the far right and ECR and Fratelli d'Italia in particular. I think the key will be on the topics which Philippe was highlighting as the ones that could kill the European Green Deal. So will there be an agreement on financing the transition? That will be key. Will there be an agreement on the social aspects of the transition, which again, I think are another key element. I think industrial forces are pushing for this everywhere in Europe, in Italy for sure. So I think we will see if there is a majority in Europe for certain big key elements that can keep the European Green Deal alive, that will happen. We will definitely see on certain issues, and the phase out of the internal combustion engine and energy efficiency are definitely two where Meloni could be pushing for less ambition and undoing some of the European Green Deal agreements.
Thank you. That's a good start. Laurence, you wanted to come in on this?
I have a question for David. What about the Cinque Stelle? How you see them? I saw that some of their members are very pro-environment and must be pro-Green Deal. It's a very southern of Italy vote. So how you see that, both from their alliances in the parliament and the functioning of the movement, which is for me quite mysterious.
I think in a way is very mysterious for many. It's hard to tell for now. They picked up 8 MEPs. There was a strong showing also from the left and green, which picked up 7. It's not clear yet where Cinque Stelle will go. I think in the past they have been interested in joining the Greens group. I don't know whether they'll end up. For sure, their record is quite positive on pro-green votes at European level. And in the last few years, they have come closer and closer as they went through political evolution from the start, the anti-establishment party that they started off as, and now they are moving towards progressive positions on climate. In Italy, in some constituencies, they came local level allied with the SD. So exactly where they will be positioned politically, it's part of the wider negotiations with the various groups. But I think in terms of where they will vote, in actual facts, I think we can expect some support for the European Green Deal from them.
So the key point, Davide, is that there is actually some parts of the Green Deal that could be supported by Fratelli d'Italia in the European Parliament. You know, would von der Leyen choose to lean on that side of the Parliament?
I think it will be depending on the topic. So on certain topics, von der Leyen. So I think overall, Meloni will still be a force that leans towards the unpicking certain parts of the Green Deal. On the path that she likes, and there are some, I think it will be either quiet support or quietly not opposing. So I think it's early to say that she will be actively supporting certain parts of the European Green Deal, although I can't exclude this. I think it will be an agreement with Ursula von der Leyen on what she gets in terms of opposing this and opposing that, and what she quietly supports.
Okay. Thank you, Davide, for now. Elinor, if we can jump from Italy to Sweden. Sweden has sent a quite different political composition to the parliament. Please react freely either to the discussion so far or give us some elements of the Swedish context.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and also interesting points made by the previous speakers here. So yeah, Sweden is coming from a little bit another trend, and so is Denmark and Finland. Here we actually have a progressive majority now in the European election, and the Greens got a lot more votes, as well as the left-wing party and the Social Democrats, actually. This has shifted a little bit in the Nordic countries. In Denmark, for example, the Social Democrats are in government, and they did not do very well in this election. But on the other hand, the left-wing party and the Greens made a really good election. So the overall picture is that progressives have really had a lot of success in this election, and the far right has actually been pushed back in this election. And I think there's some specific context to the far right in Sweden going back, and that is that there was a huge scandal where it showed that they have disinformation campaigns. They have anonymous accounts on social media, and they're sort of using fake news as a tool to affect public opinion, and this was sanctioned all the way up to the party leadership. And when this was broadcasted to the public, they reacted by saying, "Oh, look, the media is haunting us." It was a very Trumpish sort of campaign where they basically campaigned against a very established media channel here in Sweden, and the Swedes were not very fond of that sort of Trump fashion of trying to say that journalists are the enemy, and so a lot of the election campaign was about this rather than climate. But I think in general, Swedes see climate as something that needs to be solved on over state level. We can't do this on our own. So the Greens tend to do better in the European elections than they do in the national elections. They perform very poorly actually in the national elections, but here they had a huge success. Yet this is of course not enough to counter the overall trend in Europe. To make a comparison, Sweden has 28 mandates in the European Parliament, and I still call them Front National. I should, what is it?
Rassemblement National, yes.
National, voilà. They have, 30 mandates or something. So almost 10 mandates more than our entire country. So of course, this is what will sort of set the tone for the climate debate, these far-right successes in the bigger economies and bigger countries in Europe, as well as in Germany. What we've seen, though, is that many of the far-right populists, they don't really participate in the negotiations. They want to say, on the national level that, we oppose this and we were against that, but in practice, they're not showing up to meetings, they're not doing the work. So that might speak for this Green Deal still being intact, or because the ones that are actually engaged, they're not coming from the far right. And I think that this might be true for other far right parties than just the Swedish one. And I also think that the bigger picture is, as also David mentioned, the businesses are already doing these investments. The industries are already, going in the forefront of the climate transition. So in the end, money talks, and most businesses understand that it's not going to be sustainable to, put money in fossil fuel, fossil industries, and oppose this transition that is inevitable. I mean, it just needs to be made. So another interesting point, I think, is that many farmers actually have voted green this election. And, there's sort of this picture that farmers would be against, the transition and climate. And I would say that, if anyone knows, on their bare skin what it means to have more extreme weathers, droughts, etc., it's the ones that are working with agriculture. So I think this sector, if the Greens, which in Sweden and the Nordic countries tend to have a more urban appeal, if they manage to broaden that appeal and show that, we are giving you the tools to do this transition and, still do your profession that is really needed for our safety and food security and everything, then I think this could possibly be a more popular movement, whereas it's still very concentrated to the urban middle class academics.
This is most interesting. Just one question before, then we'll turn to Pawel after you, and then we will sort of to zoom in on Germany, the most important country. But Sweden has been on one side historically very ambitious climate policies. Now, has it changed with lately? And but on the other hand, also historically a bit far from the European governance talks and the Green Deal. I mean, is the Green Deal, has the Green Deal been an issue for the political elites or for the different parties at that level? And what is this still this mismatch between an ambitious climate country, but more with its own strategy, national strategy, rather than a European one? How do you see this?
Yeah, no, so I would say up until the cost of living crisis, Sweden has been in the forefront, and very few climate policies on the European level has been an issue in Sweden because we've mostly implemented something that has been more ambitious. It's basically only one subject that is controversial in the Swedish context, and that is to use forests as a carbon sink, as we have a lot of forest industry. So if you look to Europe and you want to have more carbon sinks, then it's basically saying, okay, Nordic countries, you need to stop exploiting your forests. So that's like pretty much the only issue I would say actually that has been controversial, and where Sweden has actually sort of been pushing the brakes, whereas other issues has not been that controversial. But when the cost of living crisis hit, when transportation costs increased, energy crisis, everything, that's when the tables sort of shifted. That's when we had also a government shift from a quite ambitious progressive governance on this area to a right-wing government governing with the support of the extreme right that is very anti-climate. And all of a sudden, EU is sort of the scapegoat. They want to zero the carbon taxes, for example, on fossil fuels, and then you couldn't do that because of directives coming from the EU. So EU was like becoming the scapegoat in the cost of living crisis, which is not. That's a worrying trend, and unfortunately, it's overall Swedish politicians from left or right tend to blame EU for bad things happening, no matter what it is. So there's a little bit of that sense that we're part of this union, but we're not fully committed to it, and we don't have a debate that is as lively as I would say it might be in Italy or France or Germany, where it's important to also say what you're doing on the EU level. No one asks what Swedish politicians are doing at the EU level. It's not in a debate, and it's really surprising seeing as how many of our political decisions are affected by EU directives. So we have a mismatch here between the debate in Sweden and the policies that actually do affect us on the EU level. And my worry is going forward that instead of us being, in the forefront and going ahead of the EU, EU is rather the one pulling up, holding up the pace in the Swedish climate transition, and that in turn creates democratic legitimacy issues, where we're doing things not because we need to, but because EU tells us to. So that can create sort of anti-EU sentiment. So I think that's a lesson to be learned for Swedish politicians, that you have to take these debates and argue for your points, and not just blame the EU for everything that it's slightly controversial in the public mind.
That's actually an interesting point that everyone of us could mention. That what are our respective countries bringing as a major political priority to the new parliament? But that's maybe we have time to come back to that. Pawel, please tell us something about the Polish elections and how you see the Polish, a very specific case. But I think basically every of our countries are specific. By now, France is definitely very specific. So please, the stage is yours.
Yes, thank you very much for the invite. I will quickly go over the main points, main takeaways from the results, and then talk a little bit more about how it will influence the future of Green Deal. So first of all, the election was the electoral campaign was pretty lazy and not very exciting. Which resulted in a pretty low participation of 40%, which is down from 75% in the parliamentary elections last year. So we can see that basically mobilization of most of parties was very low for this election. This was also a result of election fatigue because we've had a local election only 2 months ago, which was quite well better attended. That there was also no real the record high participation of 75% last year was a result of a mobilization of the then opposition parties to defeat Law and Justice, the populist party led by Kaczynski. So this, when it comes to results, there is a symbolic aspect to it in that this is the first election in 10 years where the Tusk party, the Civic Coalition, defeated the Law and Justice. And yeah, so it is in fact the first time in 10 years that Law and Justice lost an election on any level. However, this victory is a pretty small one. Initially, exit polls indicated a difference of about 5%, which in the end ended up being only 1 percentage point. So Civic Coalition will send 1 MEP more than the Law and Justice in this cohort. There was also a very strong showing of the far-right Konfederacja party, but with 12%, they're only sending 6 MEPs. But you can be sure that those are probably the wildest set of MEPs that you will see out of any country. So that is something that maybe will not have much influence on the works of the European Parliament, but it will definitely be in the headlines. And the other takeaway from just the election results is that despite Poland being presented as an example where the populists have been defeated, Law and Justice is not going anywhere. They still put up a very strong showing with 37% of voters voting for them and 20 MEPs. They are going to be the one of the strongest parties in the European Conservatives group. And all that was happening despite their very strong internal problems, divisions, and some pretty influential things being uncovered by the current government that they were doing when they were in power. So it was not an easy election for them, and they still managed to pull off a very strong showing. When it comes to Green Deal in the electoral campaign, Green Deal and climate were basically absent from the electoral campaign. It was all about security, it was about migration, it was about internal Polish politics, and very strong aspect of this electoral election was polarization between the Civic Coalition and the Law and Justice Party. That also resulted in basically a marginalization of other parties in the parliament, excluding the far right. If and when the Green Deal was mentioned, it was in a bad light. There was no party in this election, except maybe for the Greens, who are a very small part of the Civic Coalition, that would say anything positive about the Green Deal. The Green Deal was prominently present at farmers' protests, which were very big in Poland. Also, Kaczynski, the leader of Law and Justice, was in Brussels for one of the farmers' protests where he was saying things that, for example, the anthropogenic climate change is not real. And an important point for perhaps for the future of like the MEPs who are going to Brussels from Warsaw is that on specific policies, one policy that was actually discussed in the electoral campaign was the ICE engine ban 2035 phase out, and all of the parties running in the election were against that policy, including the left, which is nominally pro climate policy. Some of the left-wing candidates were even posting like as their main points in the campaign that they want to go to the European Parliament to change the Green Deal in order for it to work better. So this is maybe not a very positive picture that I'm painting, but I will try to put up an optimistic note at the end. So please do not lose hope yet. So who are we sending in terms of MEPs? Predictably, all of the Law and Justice and confederations of the far-right party MEPs will be very anti-Green Deal. there is not much hope that they can be swayed towards supporting elements of it. Last parliament, they have been strongly against everything, and they will continue to do so. Civic Platform will be in the European People's Party mainstream. The last parliament, they have been voting in line with the party on most issues. They are expected to be remain pretty much the same, if maybe perhaps less active in the energy field, as some of the veteran MEPs have retired. One important note on the internal party politics of the EPP group, which I think is very important in terms of what what my predecessors were discussing about the prospects of a coalition with the ECR or with the Greens. For the Civic Platform, coalition with ECR will be very difficult to swallow, because if they stand for one thing, they stand for the thing that they are not, law and justice. And any alliance with a group that contains law and justice will be very difficult. Civic Platform is I think is going to be the third biggest delegation in the EPP. So they will have strong influence, not to mention Tusk's personal influence over the political group, given especially the pretty weak relative weakness of the German, for example, the delegation. And when it comes to the smaller parties, the left and the third way, they will probably be the most closely aligned to the Green Deal, but there are very few of them. So the Polish delegation will probably not be a strong ally in terms of any future policies concerning the Green Deal. But I think the more important thing is what will happen to the what will Poland as a country be doing in the European sphere concerning the Green Deal, especially given the fact that the first half of 2025 is the Polish presidency of the Council. And here is a little bit of optimism, of very cautious optimism. Climate will not be a priority of the Polish presidency, that is for sure. Neither will Green Deal. Tusk will definitely be pushing for security, Ukraine, and he will also be pushing for jobs for his people at the highest level. There is some informal talks of getting Sikorski a good job in the next European Commission. Those will be the real priorities of the next few months for Tusk. However, internally there is a chance, and there is works to improve climate policy in Poland. The NECP and the long-term strategy, which we as the only country have not yet sent to the European Commission, are being prepared, and they are being prepared in the most progressive version that Poland has ever seen, even if it doesn't mean that it is progressive for European standards. It means that we are catching up. And the results of renewables deployment are going up in Poland. There is also some regulation coming up to make that, especially the onshore wind, to make it even faster. So there is a big chance that internally there will be quite a big push for more ambitious climate policy. And there is still the Polish presidency agenda is still in the works, and there are signs that at least some industry policy or competitiveness approaches will be present in the program. Of course, security, Ukraine will dominate, but NGOs in Poland and also some parts of the climate ministry are working very hard to make sure that there is at least some climate in terms of like improving the competitiveness of industry to be in the program of the Polish presidency. So, to sum up, Poland will not become a leader of climate talks, and there is a big chance that in terms of the European Parliament, there will be more of the same. However, there are some internal things that indicate that the Polish presidency might at least have some openings for discussion on important themes to continue the legacy of Green Deal. Thanks.
Thank you, Pawel. Laurence, I'll let you in because I think you wanted to leave at 2. So, but if you have a question or comment, please.
Thousands of questions, and it's thank you to have organized this very interesting discussion. I could stay for hours. My question to to you, Pawel, is understanding the logic of Tusk, and because he will be quite an influential member for all these reasons in the EPP, do you think he would go for a line of not working with the far right, or including Meloni, or not? And my second question is, what are the, well, and I know then all your colleagues will be working hard on the theme the MPs in EPP could support. So I was thinking what kind of roles they will play inside the group.
Sorry, I didn't hear your second question. Do I work with Meloni and the second
Well,
question?
that was mostly the question about, of course, the alliances, first question. Second question, are there issues where you see, for example, the EPP members on the German side very anti-IC engine, cars ban for 2035, but Poland at the same time has, and I understand, quite an interest into industrialization of electric vehicle. So is there issues where we could, in a way, work within the EPP, and will Polish delegation will help, or be not a good force for all these political alliance and particular issues?
So in terms of working with the right, I think at least Tusk does not have a problem with working with Meloni and parts of the right that are at least not overtly pro-Russian. The problem that they have is, of course, working with the Law and Justice, and any of the right that could open them up for an attack, that they are in any way working with forces that are pro-Russian, because they made it a very important part of their campaign. And I think from their research, it shows that it is also very important for their voters that they are an anti-Russian party, and that they are not working with forces that are considered to be kind of hesitant on Russia. Now, in terms of the policies, like potential alliances with the Polish delegation for the Green Deal files, I think I honestly I am not sure how it will play out in terms of the ICE ban. I know that in the electoral campaign they were saying that they are against it, so they would probably be working with the parts of EPP, with the German delegation that is going to be trying to append it. But it is hard to say how active will they be in this. I think they will probably try to be relatively neutral on this and go with whatever the rest of the EPP will do. When it comes to other files, I think wherever there is financing involved, there is an opening for getting the Polish delegation on board, because there is going to be a growing understanding that the financing and architecture of the EU must change if we are going to accept Ukraine as a member. So I think there it is the most interesting part where we can work with the Polish delegation, for example, in terms of new borrowing, and that could be combined also with the aspects of security and defense. So the potential for the new fund on the EU level, this could probably be an area where the Polish EPP delegation could be useful.
Yes, thank you. So unsurprisingly, the money and the finance emerge from country to country. Maybe not in Sweden, because they have their own very low public debt, and their own central bank doing well for the moment. But all across Europe, the list is long of things that should be solved through European finance. But of course, the question is, what kind of finance? Is it mutual European-based finance, or is it national? This is a sort of transition for Marion, who has been very patient and listened to all this, because we have this debate about financing, the transition. Is it through national subsidies in every country, or at the European level? And this is extremely important, because behind that debate is yet another more important one, which is about losers and winners of the transition. I think it's apparent in the Polish case is that it's the initial energy mix is so completely different from other countries, and the Green Deal I've been following a bit of the Polish campaign, and I think there was, on the negative side, there was this, fake news argument, or at least a false argument, or at least ideological argument of the Green Deal as being some sort of invention of Germany to kill off the competition. That I've heard it quite. I think that Pawel could confirm. But let's switch to Marion now, to the German context.
Yes, and I mean, hard to build up on all the very good analysis that we made, so I'll try to bring kind of new perspectives. I work on Franco-German collaboration, so I spend my Sunday being quite depressed by the results of the two countries. And I think that it's important to remember, also building on what Laurence was saying, that in other countries than France and Germany, there hasn't been a swing to the right or the far right. Or a substantial loss of green seats. It's mostly the results of election in France and Germany, who together send like a quarter of MEPs. So I think that's important to say. And on this, the two countries have one thing in common, which you have maybe experienced in your own countries as well, that European elections were seen as a confidence vote for the national governments, and they were used as such. So in Germany, the three coalition parties receive in total only one seat more, I think, than the Conservatives. So it's definitely weakening the Scholz government, which is problematic at a moment where we definitely need a strong council that pushes things forward. It's even more problematic now that France is also weakened politically. So we'll definitely not see a Franco-German motor anytime soon. I mean, that's one analysis. A figure I found quite interesting from the German election is that 50% of voters voted to express a signal to the current government. They did not necessarily do so in reaction to the Green Deal. And in fact, climate action is still a priority for German voters. So the fact this wasn't reflected in the ballots is maybe a sign that they expect other parties, like the Conservatives, to act on climate action. And that obliges them in this way. However, what we've seen from the political campaigns of the Conservatives in Germany is that they've really used the Green Deal as a totem, and especially what they call the Verbrenner aus, so the ban on combustion vehicles in 2035. This really became a political totem, and it will be interesting to see how the MEPs coming from the German delegation, the German Conservative delegation, will react to future files, especially because there are federal elections coming up next year. And the Conservators are leading the polls so far. So that will be interesting to see. Another point, maybe you may have seen this map from Germany after the results of the election. The Conservators are leading in all West member states, and the far right is leading in all the former GDR member states. So we can really see a two-speed Europe at play in Germany. And there we'll have to be careful with this losers and winners narrative and how we address the social consequences. I think a key file we need to look for to prepare for is the new carbon pricing for road transport and heating. It promises to be a polarizing debate in all member states. In Germany, there's already a carbon price on those two sectors, but it's considerably lower than when it's projected to be at European level. And we've seen in Germany very polarizing debates around the combustion engine and the heating law last summer. So they're ahead of the election next year, promising to be quite interesting, and we will need to be careful in how we communicate about this. And this brings me to my last point on communication. I was quite surprised during the election, negatively surprised to see how far the far right, the AfD, could negate the existence of climate change without being sufficiently challenged by journalists, by the media, how they could spread misinformation. Basically, in their manifesto, they say that man-made climate change is an ideology. To still be able to say this now is crazy, I think. So how do we fight misinformation? How do we, raise more awareness? Because I think we're all tired of having to explain climate change all over again, but it's something we still need to do, obviously.
First question is, do you think that the support for von der Leyen is strong enough? I'm coming back to the hypothesis of Philippe Lamberts initially. And is this the strategy to cling on to the Green Deal, in the sense it is, after all, her heritage?
the thing is, the three coalition parties made a coalition agreement when they came to power in which it states that if the president of the commission is not German, the Greens will decide on the German commissioners. No one is expecting the German conservative to want this, so we think they will agree on von der Leyen, but they might differ from the faction line during voting specific files, especially ahead of the federal election. What Germany overall, and maybe even more the conservatives, are expected to bring is this focus on the industrial deal, the competitiveness, and as Laurence was saying, also what is the role then of an export country like Germany? How should they react to protectionist measures? How should they build partnership with other countries? How CBAM should be expanded or implemented or transitioned to? I mean, those are questions that will definitely be important for Germany and for the conservatives especially. And you mentioned financing. That's a complicated question in Germany, also at national level. And there's a strong disagreement inside the governing coalition. The budget is supposed to be drafted, finalized by early July, and many commentators fear this could lead to even more disagreement in the coalition or even the split of the coalition. So it has yet to be seen how Germany, which faces massive investment challenge, react to them, and how this affects the European debates on the MFF, among others.
Yes, that's I mentioned finance because it was the common point in many of the talks. So thank you to all of us. I want to speak about the French case, which is a disaster in sorts. But I think that one takeaway is maybe that there is, well, now we have upon the European elections, we will have the another elections, the national elections, but up till now, at least, the picture was that very weak representation for the Green Deal in the sent to the European Parliament, but still with some key players very active in promoting such and such policy inside, both among liberals and social democrats, etc. And on the intergovernmental level, there was a country that supported its own national interests for the nuclear industry, for instance, but also the fierce opposition to the agricultural reforms. But on the other hand, also some positive points. I mean, we have one program at the Veblen Institute about trade reforms, and my colleague Mathilde Dupré, she's with us today, she could talk long about the windows of opportunity opened at the national level when you pursue a change at the European level. So until now, of course we have this additional national elections, but until now there has been an active player both in trade field, but also on the carbon adjustment mechanism, and also Emmanuel Macron has been spoken about. Lastly, he spoke about the green climate objectives for monetary policy, for instance, which is another issue that is very we work quite extensively on these issues. So there is the European institution level and there is the intergovernmental level. Otherwise, I suggest that we take maybe another round now freely whenever whoever feels for it. Coming back more to the most difficult part of this discussion, which is more about the future and how you see the political opportunities. Where are the opportunities? For instance, one question that I could have to all of you is what chunks of the European Green Deal, which was a huge package, as you know, of course, what chunks of the European Green Deal are the most threatened or alternatively have the most chances to prevail? That would be one from your specific country perspective. That's one question. And the other would be what kind of proposals would be most efficient from your point of view in order to overcome the blockages? I'm coming once more to the perspective of the Europe is threatened in the international competition, but at the same time we have intra-European competition, and the green transition is sort of hostage of this as well, because I feel that there is there's very little cooperative strategy among when it comes to industry, whatever. So I'm now in this last quarter of an hour. I hope for a collective brainstorm. brainstorming about this? What opportunities, what threats and opportunities do you see? Who wants to start?
I can start out. I would say that and coming back to what you asked earlier about what Italy is bringing to Europe, I think the big push will be on technological neutrality and a longer role for gas with carbon capture, which are a danger because they both delay the transition, and they're both economically non-viable, really, because it's a lot more economically efficient to be picking certain technologies that are more cost effective, and especially carbon capture at the moment is just an excuse to let gas run longer. But these will be instances from the government. I think that the solution, coming back to what Philippe was saying earlier, is to finance everything, because if you finance everything, then you are also able to put an effort in the two areas that are the most important ones at the moment, which are the economic competitiveness in the one hand, so having really an industrial strategy that is incorporated into the green transition and vice versa, and also very important, the social elements, because I think a lot of the support for the far right and the opposition to the European Green Deal comes from the fear, not entirely unjustified, that there will be winners and losers of the transition. And this is due to the fact that there are no policies, and the policies have no money behind them, or there is not enough, really. So I think financing and having social policies that can really show that the transition is not a threat to those who can less afford it, I think will be the way forward.
Financing everything. I love that phrase. I will.
Everything that needs to be financed in the green transition.
Of course, there is. Of course, we have this political discord about the central bank and etc. And but still, I seen Pawel, and I think Marion as well. You wanted to jump in? No, Elinor. Okay, so Pawel and Elinor, please.
Oh, I saw Marion go before me, but yeah. If I may, then in terms of what's in danger, I think it is important to realize that while the center held, nothing that has been achieved cannot be changed, and there is a very big risk of turning around and losing ground. I think in terms of, I very much agree with what Davide said, but maybe just not to avoid I mean, we kind of all know about what policies should be implemented, that we need more financing, we need more investment, we need competitiveness, that US and China will continue investing in green technologies, and EU will maybe become like a kind of a consumer of green technologies instead of a producer. Those are all very well recognized danger, but I think what is needed right now in this difficult moment politically in Europe is to not be afraid to put Green Deal and climate policy back on the agenda, because I think there is quite a lot of fear that, especially after the farmers' protests, that whenever we talk about Green Deal, there will be backlash. Backlash is inevitable. The thing that progressive parties in Europe need is a narrative that is brave and courageous, and not trying to disguise caring for climate as competitiveness, as security. Those are all important aspects, but voters in Europe, in Poland, but in Europe as a whole, still do care about climate, and they will continue doing so. And I think that, especially looking at my own country, even the progressive parties have been hiding in fear of the farmers' protests and in other forms of backlash. And I don't think that this is necessarily a good approach, especially for the future.
It's a very important point, actually. To be frank, that's why we got involved into the European Green Deal in the first place 5 years ago, because we saw it as a potentially, new narrative of redefining welfare in the age of ecological crisis. It seems to me that it has not evolved into this. So the question is, what could we do better during the next mandate period? Elinor, I didn't hear you did raise your arm?
And I think Marion was first in queue.
Okay, Marion, Elinor, and Philippe. Okay.
Yeah, I'll be quick. On your question, what is likely to stay from the Green Deal? I think it's pretty clear. It's the industrial renewal aspect, the ETS1 emissions, etc. What is threatened, but what is at the same time an opportunity, is further measures in the transport and building sectors, which are usually lagging behind in terms of EU climate targets. As I was saying, there's a new carbon price coming in 2027. This is a huge social risk because the price could jump because the member states are very delayed in their national measures. That means there will be too much emissions in 27 and the price could jump really high. But as we prepare for it, as we offer decarbonization measure for household, as we show that through decarbonized alternative you can save money, this is an opportunity to gain back voters. It's an opportunity, but it's also a condition to not get an even bigger backlash after the introduction of this new carbon price in 2027.
Elinor?
Yeah, so I think on energy and transportation, that's where it's sort of more shaky here. Here in the north, we're not a very densely populated country. When the gas prices peaked, people, that are still behind, climate transition was saying, this is unreasonable, we can't do this. And the far right was really gaining support through the cost of living crisis. And for me, I'm a little bit bitter actually about this period because Sweden, when the war started, we had all the benefits on our side. We had a completely, fossil-free, renewable energy sector. We were ahead of everything, but this was not at all reflected in our electricity prices or in our gas prices. Swedes that have done these investments in water plants, in windmill power, etc., they didn't gain anything from it because of how the European energy market is constructed. And now, we're reforming the energy market to further sort of allocate from where, the energy is produced to where there's a lack of energy, which is of course good for the system as a whole. But from the northern perspective, it's something that I think can really, the far right can really gain from this in the northern countries. And the northern countries have still been, a push in these climate issues historically. So even though we're not, the big players, it's still, an important one to have on board. So I would have wished, for this energy crisis to have been like, okay, well, look at Sweden, look at Finland, who did these investments. They got actually lower energy prices. So let's all make those investments, but now we can't, make that example. And I think, for me, coming also from a trade union finance think tank and trade union background, the progressive have sort of a little bit maybe lost sight sometimes of workers' rights, of these plain old sort of social democratic material issues when it comes to climate transition. For example, now we have a big strike against Tesla still going on. It's been going on for almost half a year now. And there's this like cognitive mismatch. Oh, well, but we want electrified cars, we want this industry, but it also needs to be good jobs, right? And same, we want windmill power, but when they're making huge, windfall profits, this needs to be taxed. It's like, had this been a coal industry, or had this been, Ford or an American, car manufacturer from normal gas cars, everyone would have been on board on this. But it's like this greenwashing element of it sometimes has made that material conflict less evident. And I think you, as progressives going forward, needs to have that, okay, yes, green jobs, but needs to be, good paying jobs, collective bargaining agreements as any other industry. Yes, we want to subsidize green industries, but if they're profitable, they should pay taxes like everyone else. Like we need to align this with our social security system and not because there is an interest, I think, for some companies to just take that shortcut and greenwash into not taking that social responsibility, basically.
That's a huge political point. Of course, our social security systems remain national, So we're coming back to the intra-European competition argument. But Philippe, yes,
I wanted to react to what Pawel said about the narrative, but first, Elinor, I can't agree more on what you just last said. We had the discussion in the group, in the Green Group. Some were saying, yeah, well, if the renewables industry is making windfall profits, that's good because they will invest. And my answer to that is no, there should be no windfall profits for anyone. If we are to have a well-functioning market economy, profits have to be taxed regardless. And I don't know. To me, it's not like rent extraction is good when it's for green purposes and it's bad for everything else. So can't agree more. Pawel, I would agree with you that we should not sugarcoat this. And that is a discussion that we have had within the Greens too. Yeah, we should prevent a bright new future that is desirable and all the rest of it. The reality of the transition is that it will require massive efforts. And effort is almost the same word as comfort, but it's the opposite, right? So, of course, we should not kid ourselves. And I think that our citizens know that. So whenever you come giving the impression that we are sugarcoating it, citizens will turn off because they know that we are trying to sell them efforts under the guise of comfort. That said, we should not underestimate or undersell the economic argument for it, because frankly speaking, if you believe that you're safe with your jobs, good quality jobs, well paid, etc., in industries that are doomed to disappear, well, let's take the long view. And does Europe want to lead in the economic activities that will be linked to the transition, or do we want to be followers? There is an economic argument to be made too. But the motivation, the principal motivation to me, and that's the basis of the narrative, and you may call this, I don't know, I'm not targeting you, Pawel, but some will say, yeah, but we should not be doom and gloom. But actually the motivation of the transition is ensure survival of humanity. And that to me, it can be seen as a negative, but actually I think that life is a positive motivation, right? But so basically what we want is preserving life. But if we want to do that, we need to roll up our sleeves. And the key here to me in the argument has always been the acceptability of effort. And to me, the first factor is recognition of the need for the effort. And there, I think we are there. I heard, of course, there are still people denying the materiality of the climate change and all the rest of it, and saying that this is an ideological conspiracy. But I would argue that the vast majority of our fellow citizens accept that there is necessity. The second condition for acceptance of the effort, for me, is making sure that indeed people perceive the efforts that are asked as a response to the necessity. You know, I remember arguments with Gilets jaunes in France where basically they were saying, guys, the fleet of container ships on the planet emits way more than the entire automobiles park that is running on the planet. Why don't you start with them? And there's a point there. I mean, not going after maritime industry, aviation industry, etc., is not right. But that is no excuse for not going after the internal combustion engine either. But the third factor is the most crucial, and that is justice. I mean, people have had it. They have suffered the global financial crisis, the Eurozone crisis for the member states of the Euro, the COVID, and now the energy price crisis, etc. And it's always the same thing. The woman and the man on the street end up carrying the biggest share of the burden. And so the gut feeling of most of our fellow citizens is, yeah, okay, you come with your green efforts and we know who will foot the bill at the end of the day. It's going to be the woman and the man on the street, the ordinary citizens. And unless we can credibly show how we will make the largest, well, the broadest shoulders carry more than that, well, at least their fair share of the effort, we won't be successful. And therefore, take the problem, I think that we raised this already before in this circle. The problem is that while most environmental legislation is Europe-driven, all the levers to ensure the just transition, taxation, social security, organization of social services, organization of the labor market, all these levers are national. And the only thing that Europe can do is try to steer national policies. But in order to do that, first, what you need is a political consensus. You know, for 40 years, the European Union drove neoliberal reforms. Flexibilization of labor markets, anti-redistributive tax reforms, weakening of the social services and all the rest of it. It's not because there was an entity at European level that felt like this and then the member states felt like that. Actually, there was a political consensus that neoliberalism was the way to go. The thing at the moment is that the European Green Deal is still not a political consensus at European level. And so, because as a national leader, it might be convenient for me to blame the effort part on Europe, but at least I could offer more just taxation systems and all the rest of it in order to remain popular. But for that, I would need to be convinced of the absolute imperative that the European Green Deal is. And the fact is that the vast majority of policymakers at EU and national level are still not convinced.
Yes, thank you for this. You're leaving the parliament, but I hope you're not leaving the politics, because
We'll see.
you'll need it. You'll need it anyway. But the problem you both stated, Elinor and Philippe, is very well known. I don't think we can possibly realistically hope for transfer of social policies, massive transfer of social policies to the EU. But we could put social and green indicators into the macroeconomic governance of Europe.
Voilà.
This
Exactly.
is we published recently a paper about the so-called social pillar, a thorough analysis of the European social pillar, showing exactly that it is like a pillar of very, very weak pillar, not addressing at all the questions or only marginally the issues that we have pointed out here at the very end of this discussion. So that is, I hope that at least it's on our agenda. I hope it's on yours. It's still the same issue of we lost the battle for the Stability Pact, but greening the European semester, greening the cooperation tools, of greening the investment policies, etc. And providing for social enough funds so the states can protect populations through their national social policies. All this is on agenda, and our really strong point is that the climate crisis won't disappear from public concern for obvious reasons. I think so. So the political translation of this we'll see. Anyway. We are over time, and thank you so much, all of you, for this discussion. I hope we'll meet again in autumn to catch up on where we stand. Thank you so much. As I said, we try to convert a part of our discussions into our review, l'économie politique. So let's wish for the best, and especially for us, wish our good luck here in France, because we have a double challenge now. See you soon.
See you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
See you soon. Bye.